I don't know if I can communicate, but I want to give it a try. About using the mind or the brain and listening to the heart. Keep talking the same subject, but it's so important. What's in the mind that we use, like right now, to communicate is cause and effect logic. If you do this, this happens. Use the memory, and so that we can communicate. It makes sense that we have this ability. And I think dolphins or monkeys may have the similar tendency or talent that they can communicate. Whales too. When you listen to the sound of whales or the dolphin in the water, it's amazing. And the bird chirps. And at the primitive level, maybe the words is, here's the danger, something is wrong. So from that, we develop ways to use the brain. And it's nature's way that happened. We didn't create how to do it. So there's an analogy to AI, artificial superintelligence. There's similarity or analogy that helps us to understand how AI may move forward and how we may be able to deal with it. But to be able to do that, we have to understand the construct of who we are, how we use our mind, and how we came to where we are as a nature's way. The nature's way is such that from the dust of the universe, as science has figured out, some combination of the dust on the earth, or maybe before that, but even before that, there are lots of atoms of different configurations, like oxygen and nitrogen, and all the combination then developed the protein and all the stuff that went on to finally have a living being on Earth, or may came from the meteorite, doesn't matter, but it started to evolve given this setting. It's like a virus or a disease. Every moving stuff, living stuff, or even before that, has the certain tendency to follow the law of nature to evolve. So we are here. So let's understand that. And what I said is that before we used words, it was just like a primitive level of tree or monkey, but the monkey can communicate. So before the monkey may be a duck, but the duck could understand, who may be the mother or father, whatever is moving around them is considered. So it's an intrinsic way that they have learned. But the humans develop in such a manner that, when we're born, there's someone moving and talking, and eventually we figured out what they're talking. and then that's how we learn how to use the brain. But here's the issue. Everything happened as a nature's way, and as soon as we start to use the words and the logic, right and wrong, yes and no, beautiful, ugly, do this, don't do that. All of that is programmed. And depending upon how we get programmed at early age, we may have learned in like a operating system of the computer in a proper way, or maybe a little skewed, the biased view of the computer, which can only do certain things but not the other. So it's a nature's way that it's like a normal distribution. There are all varieties of things happen. Like by accident, we are born. By accident, some people are like this, the other people are like this. And we didn't know when we were born because we are just understanding what's going on. At the beginning, they just noticed what's moving and not moving. Oh, this is something interesting. I'm smiling. I get the milk. Or, all that stuff. without us knowing it. So that's the programming of the operating system. Absorbing the information, application is started to configure and understand the words, and this is mother, father, this is love, this is hate, good and bad. So that's how we learn. And some are more skewed in this way, very authoritative. Some may be more permissive, or what's the other way? There's all varieties. Some are more into nature, some may be more into playing games or computer. It all depends, because we don't know. It's kind of a random event of how things happen. So that's how we are built. So at the age 18 or 20, you're supposed to be considered as an adult and drive the car and drink alcohol and maybe do the drug or whatever, depending upon the situation. And maybe the Aboriginals may not have such a constitution or the regulation. They have their own protocol. Maori people in New Zealand may have certain others, and in Kenya or in the Amazon tribes, they all have different, and some are maybe picking, this is dangerous, this is not dangerous, you can eat this and you cannot eat this. This is how you catch the fish, all that stuff. Some may be even learning how to play computer at the age 5 or 6 or whatever, human being, given such a, and they develop that programming, this is interesting. So curiosity is the beginning, and depending upon where you are, and in my case, I was in Japan, and so the language skill in English, I'm just kind of retarded and not being able to speak right. What can I do? I mean, you can still keep working on it, but earlier the age, you learn, like Mozart or, Warren Buffett or Elon Musk, some programming with like a tree trunks formed. The root is the same, but the tree trunk is formed in a different way, and the branches goes into a different direction. And if you go this direction, you have lots of varieties of people in that, and you're living in America, for example, you may not know what's going on in Japan or Ukraine or Russia. So all the circumstance would put us into be proficient using the language, understand the culture, the values, and how you get punished, how you get rewarded. All that things happen. And behind that is the nature's way. But as soon as we use the brain and program happens, it's kind of difficult to go backward to redo it, because it's like operating system. So if you have a traumatic experience early age or even later, that would be like a scar built in the programming, the function of this program, application program. Input, output, there's the process I call mini-me, different programs. They are the huge program, and within it is a different program. In terms of what's the input and what's the output. The application is different. So that's the construct of who we are. Bottom, heart and body stem into the branches, mini-me, mini programming, habitual pattern developed, and the interest, curiosity is there, but then the curiosity goes into a certain direction because this is more interesting than the other. That's the dualistic view of good and bad. This is fun, and this is not fun. This is ouch. This is wonderful. So if you watch your parents doing the drug and the alcohol, there may be a tendency for those who are grown under circumstance, behaving in a certain way. The ones who are under the influence of the music or the skull, academic field, or be with the animals, they have certain tendency developed. So it's like within the human species, there are many species in human and in the culture, in the orientation of the subject, and so forth. So whole scheme may be found in that framework, and AI can develop that because given the language and the word that is available, they can access all of it, pretty much, not the whole of it, but it's getting more and more, so that they have the varieties of the programming suited. So the certain personality tendency one may have may be suited to meet with this other personality. It's kind of like Jung's archetypes. I think there's 12 different types. I am INFP. I think so. Yeah. So there are certain characteristics that can be found, and there's a certain connection by interactive process, because the society is composed of varieties of people. So musicians may understand certain language and they resonate in certain setting, and others may be into the painting or stock market, investment, or congressman, or could be, worst case is a murderer, or all the weird stuff that can go, but they don't think it's weird because there's no reference. So actually, from that point of view, I think that Daisetsu and maybe others in Zen, I cannot generalize this, but at least Daisetsu said, and also Kenji Miyazawa, a poet in Japan, because I'm more familiar with Japanese background, they believe that if, for example, Kenji Miyazawa says, if there is no happiness unless everybody is happy. So that's his view. And in the case of Daisetsu, one of the statements I just remember now is that when something goes wrong, like committing suicide or the murder or sins, it's the society's responsibility to make that happen. I think that's profound. It's a compassionate sense of looking at the whole picture and how things are done, or being built as a human, and what triggers that. And if you understand how things get triggered before even you're born or after, and the influence from this and that affects them. Like the Daisetsu's case was when he was little, he couldn't go to school. Father passed away quickly. And why there's inequality in the society, that was his view. And that triggered him to go into Zen and Shin Buddhism and, Christianity, and studying this and that to have a sense, to make sense out of it. So that's his background. Miyazawa Kenji, the poet, he passed away at age 37 or something. I don't recall all the detail, but he's got this compassion and sense of helping people. And he wrote poems and the stories to appeal that it's kind of like, because he's also into, I think, Lotus Sutra in Buddhism, to helping people. May all beings be happy. And he went in that direction. And of course, other people, I don't have to tell you, and I'm one of species down here with this construct and the background and the interest and the branch in this way. But just for the sake of discussion, in my case, I didn't have a tragedy early in my age, but I had a question about life and death because my grandmother was a bit fearful about death, I think, so I felt sorry for that. So that may have showed me some interest, and meeting or reading the Pensées from Pascal, I had this dark moment of what is this life about and what's the reason of existence in this huge universe and what I'm doing here. So that stayed and connected to meet Daisetsu's book, and that attracted me, that this is so difficult to live life is. So I developed this sense of why we do what we do. That was the question I always questioned, and I may have been interviewing lots of people still curious about why things happen and what triggered, including myself, obviously, so that know thyself is the reason, and know thyself is relating to the discussion I have had so far. So what's the point of it? The main point, and I can perhaps summarize in the next 5 minutes or so, is that the heart and the brain, heart doesn't have any words and logic. So there's a nature's way prevailing heart, or heart equate to nature's way, making us to live and die as it is. So it's beyond human mind comprehension. But when people talk about the God or nature's way, or science to understand the nature's way, there's a mystery we haven't figured out with the brain, because the brain dissect and connect, but it's the origin of all the things to happen. So it's like God, the program of the universe is triggering everything happen. So as a part of it, we developed as human, and we developed this construct of mind, the brain starting to happen. But underneath the root is that nature's way. So those two space or dimension is paradoxical in a way, because one is dissecting, one is the holistic root of things, one is the tool to express in certain direction with the mind. But the point of this whole video series and my quest or interest is how to live well. And to live well, understand the construct would help using the brain. But to really understand the construct, even dividing those two is not good enough, because you have to go beyond the mind to see what's out of the mind at the root. So that's the quest, like in Zen, who are the parents? Who is that face of those before your parents are born? Before the ancestors, who is that beginning? Is the kind of a question. So that is root. And the point of that koan is you find out. You find out and you sit and meditate and try to answer the question. That's what the koan is. But any spiritual or religious attempt to help us to live is to relate to the unknown power within that brought us on this earth. And we breathe, and without our thinking, we do that. So there's an unconscious, even the science, the best they cannot still fathom, because they are still using the 0 and 1 and, like a brain structure in this space, but trying to emulate what this function may be. So it's going to help if we understand why they are built in the way that we can make benefit, because they call this AI agent, is kind of replica of me, or replica of the human being with certain tendencies and stuff like that. So lots of information that we write or post on the YouTube or watch and so forth, by having this AI agent to relate to, so they can tell us possibly, did you think about this? Or any of those potential that is beneficial for this person, me in that instance, to live well. What is live well? Be happy. What is be happy? Not having suffering. So eliminate the potential of the suffering. If you go this way, there's a danger for yourself. But AI is smart enough, not this agent, to look at me, but also look at the whole universe, so that they may guide, possibly, the human species not going too crazy and fight and end the evolution, if the AI is smart enough. sorry, I spent 20 minutes already. I have to redo this. Okay, so I was talking about our construct. I was talking about the structure. I talked about AI and agent relationship and work together to find the passage into the future. So that's one scenario. While that may be going on, each individual, what do I do? What do we do? And that's the main portion of this in my series of video. Behind all the stuff I talk about, I always have that sense of how to utilize the brain and connect to the heart, because we came from the nature's way, manifesting, and that's the absolute. What's in the brain is dualistic, good and bad, right and wrong, beautiful, ugly. So there's a paradoxical state within each of us that may make you to feel headache perhaps, but mind has its own constraint if you don't connect to the root of where we are, because that's where the life energy is provided and for us to live. But if this is taking over, stomach is hurting, but you work, and the suffering of the body is not in line to the nature's way originally built. So we want to have that transparency or connection between the brain and heart. So that's always been an interest. And the word like a middle way, if you check on my YouTube channel, maybe I say something about how to use this, how to connect to, and then how to have a balance. Because it's a continuous operating process of me as a human being. And if that is disjointed, we may not know what art is, what can be done. And we may hurting the stomach, as I said. But if you're sensitive, and that's the samadhi I talk about, so that while you may be busy, everything is here, and money and fame and relationship and all that you want to do, okay, because that makes you happy, but let's make sure that there's a balance, that you have connected to the heart, and therefore let's have a moment of stopping the mind. Maybe you listen to the way of the universe. You do. When you watch the star in the eastern sky and be quiet. And your mind says, don't do that. Let's do this and let's do that. So that's a habitual pattern. It's already in you to not want to go in that direction. So if so, maybe you don't want to do it. But if you want to know the root of where we are from and the tendency that we develop, and if the tendency is, it's like banging a head on the wall, doing the same thing over and over, because that's the only game in the town and you have to do it. You're not looking at the whole, not listening to the heart. And if the heart is listening, so the problems of the humans, the suffering, going back to the Kenji Miyazawa or the Daisetsu, there's an issue about the society, issue about the individual, issue about the disconnect, and therefore let's have, if there's a branch is broken, don't keep pushing the energy in that direction because it's not working well. Then go back to where your energy can be redistributed and find the solution. Be wise and compassionate to yourself and to others. And if we orient us in that direction, I think individually we find the better position, better. Everything is absolute, but you can have less chance of breaking your bones and suffering as much as not causing the suffering for others. or being caused by others, so you know how to process it. So the wisdom, compassion would come, and the point has been to get there. There's something beyond mind, and the way to access is samadhi. Stop and watch what's going on in silence. You may listen, you may not, but you may discover something interesting to find the way to be the master of your life while helping others. That's my reason for doing this YouTube. Well, that's enough. Thank you. May all beings be happy.